I was wrong. I recommended a brace for these X3s, and ended up costing me about $1,500. So don't listen to me. So my bad. Do not buy this brace after all. I'll show you exactly why. So Can-Ams are notorious for having weak steering. I've talked about that in several videos before. Basically, this happens. Basically, you can wiggle the wheel in and out, and if you watch videos of these through the whoops, these wheels are flapping like 3 inches side to side. And that's because right here, this is the tie rod, there is no support for this whole steering rack to not rotate, because when you hit stuff and it deflects the tie rod in or out, it ends up rotating the whole steering rack. And it's a known problem on Can-Ams in general, but especially X3s. There's 4 or 5 different companies that make different types of braces for these. This is the Hess one, which I recommended in a previous video, but yeah, it's not good. I ended up buying their full kit. It comes with the flag, which bolts into the steering rack itself, the brace right here, and then these tie rods. So this is the second rack I've had in the car. Original rack, I didn't have any brace. I killed it right away. Yeah, that one, I understood why it happened. So I thought, okay, I'll throw a fresh rack in it, and then I'll put this Hess brace in. We're good. No. It lasted 1 race. So I rebuilt the rack and then added the flag, all that stuff. I thought that would fix it, adding the tie rods, the steering flag, and then having a tight rack and all that stuff. No. King of the Castle race that we just did, it killed it. I mean, that's 150 miles and the rack is already toast. Like I showed, you can wiggle this wheel back and forth. It's obliterated inside. So do not buy a Hess brace. What you should get, the real solution, and this is the right combination of stuff to have. I've talked to tons of race teams. Chris Blaze told me this originally on his factory Can-Am. He's been through all this stuff before. He told me the Hess brace wasn't going to work. I didn't listen to him. I thought it would. Anyway, so first off, brand new rack right there, straight from Rocky Mountain. And then the big thing. Sandcraft proper steering brace. This one slides with the rack, which I'll show you. It's got grease fittings. But yeah, so Sandcraft brace is the way to go for sure. It comes with tie rods, but unfortunately it still uses the same stock steering flag, which is these right here. Basically these thread on like that. Kind of how the stock system is. Unfortunately, these ball joints are really, really weak. So the way to do it is to get these ZRP tie rods, which have these clevises on the end, because this heim joint is going to be a billion times stronger than this puny little ball joint. So basically you can see here, Sandcraft right here threads in to the stock steering flag versus the ZRP, which replaces this joint right here. Granted, it's a lot more money for these ZRP tie rods and clevises, but this clevis right here definitely is going to be a lot beefier than these. I have worn these out before. I know for a fact how weak these little puny ball joints are. And yeah, this is unfortunately one of the weakest points of the whole steering system in these X3s. So this combination right here is the way to go. It's even stronger than the Shock Therapy. I know I'm wearing a Shock Therapy beanie. Shock Therapy steering rack, and way less maintenance on it, because those you have to take apart. You have to shim them properly, otherwise they don't act right. They're stiff. There's a lot of negatives of those. So a lot of racers that run an X3 run this steering system, even on a full tube chassis car. So anyway, learn from my $1,500 mistake and don't buy the Hess system. Trust me, they're a cool company to work with. They're really, really, really nice people, all that stuff. They make really good stuff. The brace is well made itself, but it's just not the best design compared to the Sandcraft system. So anyway, let's get it installed. Let's rip this thing apart. Here we go. And steering rack and tie rod and all that stuff are out. So I also took the hood off. That's for something else, doing some fab stuff on there. So anyway, so the Delrin bushing right there, it slides in that slot right there. And I mean, I've had this thing on here for 2 races and that's already worn out. So yeah, goes to show, because those rod ends and all that are tight. But anyway, stock rack is out. And now what I gotta do is get this new brace bolted onto this new rack and then the new tie rods. So this is what the ends are. Basically, these right here take the place of these ball joints, like I said. And then fortunately, we don't even have to use this because basically these thread right into right there. So anyway, I'll get this thing built. Okay, so Sandcraft brace is more or less installed. The seals right there were pretty tricky. Those things are really, really stiff. I did use a lot of this stuff. It's seal grease for suspension. You can use regular grease, whatever. There's also a Zerk fitting. I just wanted to do that while assembling. Anyway, okay, so I got this end on. The next step in the instructions is to take the ball joints off the stock flag and then put these tie rod ends on. I'm obviously not using those, like I said. So now what I need to do is thread these clevises on, and to do so, I had to look this up. You pull that out, keep everything together, so I'm gonna thread it back together. Set that aside. So now I need to thread this clevis onto here. There's, if you can see, there's a Torx head bolt, if you can see, right there. Torque to 60 foot-pounds, so easy as that, and then I'll throw these tie rods on and then I'll get this thing in. Good to go. A couple things I did. I greased all the bolts and Loctited, torqued, all that, greased this. 2 things to make my future life a lot easier, I hope that I did. I always do this on tie rods. I put a little dot of cross check on either one here at both ends, just so when you're twisting the tie rods you can count turns. Also, I measured the total length of the tie rod end to end on the old one, and then set this one right to that, so because I know the alignment was almost perfect before, so that way we're close. That way I'm not having to turn and turn and turn and turn while it's on the car. It's a lot easier to make adjustments here. So set it to the exact length it was. Now let's throw it in the car. Okay, so that's the steering rack installed. Let's see if I can get in there. It's not done, obviously. Still got to do the tie rod ends, and then do an alignment. But I'm replacing all the suspension bolts and doing some other stuff up here, so I'm not putting it back together just yet. But yeah, that was a little bit tricky. For sure trickier than normal. So getting the splines on the steering shaft right there, let's see, that was hard for sure, because normally you can get all three of these bolts here. This one, that one, and this one right there. Normally you can slide those through and then just leave them loose, like maybe not even put the nut on, and then you can kind of wiggle that on. There's less wiggle room with this brace on, which, I mean, ultimately is great. That's what I want. So anyway, that was hard to do. Every time I have the steering input shaft off, I replace one of those bolts, like $4 from Rocky Mountain for a brand new one. So I always replace that, and then then I just went through and torqued. I still need to put cross check on everything. This orange stuff. Because I did torque all these bolts, so that way in the future, after I do shakedown on this, I can look at it and make sure everything's still tight. But yeah, so that's gonna do it on this one. Kind of lame to leave it like this, but I have a bunch of other stuff to do on the front end that I'm not gonna video because that's boring. Overall, I'm really stoked on this Sandcraft brace. Stay tuned. I mean, if it wears out like the Hess one, I'll speak up. I paid full retail for this freaking thing, so already it feels a lot tighter. Everything feels more braced. So on the Hess brace, there's a little tab with a pretty thin Delrin bushing that wears out pretty quickly. That's all that's bracing the steering rack from rotating back and forth, which is what wears it out internally. This one completely eliminates that. It's a big piece of billet aluminum with big 10mm bolts that's going to keep it solid and keep it from flexing, not just a little thin piece of aluminum with Delrin that's going to wear out really quickly. There's also seals that'll keep the sand and all that crap out of the Delrin on this one, because there are big Delrin bushings on that big 1-inch bar. Those aren't going to wear out. There's wipers, there's dust seals, and then it's also greased, which the Hess one, there's no grease. So everything I can see so far seems like this is the much better option. I know multiple racers that have thousands of race miles on these things. Stock rack. This is the third rack I've been through on this car, or fourth or whatever. So I'm tired of replacing them. But anyway, next is going to be doing the bumper fabrication stuff. Get the front end all back together, and then I'm throwing a skid plate on this thing. So I already got it partway through that process. I'm really excited about that, so stay tuned for more. So, and then lots more prep for the next race. Big race. So stay tuned. Thanks for watching. Peace.